the Dragon Ball Super Masterclass 31. Plan for the worst, hope for the best strategy. So hopefully they don't, these guys, let me give them a like, they don't mind me using their video as background content. So let me lower the audio just in case. Have a little bit of ambience. So that way at least you can see something while I talk. So I couldn't think of like what else to do. I was like, oh, let me get some untapped gameplay. This is like from 2019, so some vintage stuff right here. So the point is like plan for the worst case, right, scenario, right? Plan for the worst, hope for the best. And let me talk about combo math at first. The idea of like when you attack, you know, you combo whatever you combo. Let's say you play a super combo on your 15k leader, so you're 25k, right? You know that you're 25k. Your opponent knows that because now it's public knowledge. But what you don't know is how much your opponent has in their hand to out combo that. Clearly, we know if their opponent is if their leader is awakened, that they need at least 15k to out combo. So they're going to need at least a super combo and a 5k or 3 5ks, right, to out combo the attack. So you don't know if they have 15k combo power in their hand. They do. They know that, but you don't. Just like they know that your attack is only 25k. It's not going to get any bigger than that. It's only going to be 25k. So they know how strong your attack is or how much you combo, and they know how much they can combo. They know if they can or cannot. It's still up to them to choose if they want to out combo the attack or not. That's the whole point of it. They get to choose that. So you don't know if they can or can't. But they do. So you as the attacking player, you know, you have to plan for the worst. Worst case scenario, right, is they can outcome. And not only that they can, they choose to. Those are two factors. They can outcome and they choose to outcome. You as an attacker, you're guessing. You don't, because you don't know, right? Unless you have an effect that lets you know what's in their hand, or you count how many cards in their hand and you can guess. Obviously, if they have 2 cards in their hands, right, the likelihood of one of those cards being a super combo and the other one being a 5k, especially if you're smart enough to attack when they're tapped out, so they can't use one of their battle cards that has 10k combo power but requires an energy. Always put your opponent in a position where they can't, where it's harder for them to combo out, where they have to use super combos to get 10k, and they have to use a whole bunch of 5ks. That's the situation you always want to put your opponent in, that they have to use super combos and 5ks. Never a 10k that costs an energy, right? Because you should always wait until they're tapped out, or at least force them to be tapped out. So you're always waiting for the opportunity, and you take advantage of it and exploit it. So that's the thing. Plan for the worst, right? Plan for the worst case scenario of them having a card in their hand that has 10k combo power plus a 5k in their hand, and they have 1 energy. That's the worst case scenario, is that they can't afford it, and then they choose to. To mitigate that is you make sure they don't have an energy untapped. So that way, if they are in that situation where they have 2 cards in their hands, one is 10k, but it requires an energy, and that one's a 5k, they couldn't out combo. Taking that decision away of them choosing to or having the ability to. So you always want to put them in a position where they can't do it. That way you don't have to worry about them choosing to do it. Right? So you plan for the worst, which is they can and choose to do it, to do anything. They can stop. They can counterplay. They can negate your attack. They can block. You always want to mitigate what they can do, on top of the fact that you're hoping they don't do. Right? They don't choose to outcome. They choose not to block. They choose not to negate. Right? Same thing as if you attack with something that has double strike. Right? When I combo, when I attack, it's not to guarantee the attack to go through. I hope the attack goes through. Don't get me wrong. I want the attack to go through, especially if it's double strike, triple strike, right? Especially if it's a game-winning attack. I want it to go through. I want it, but I don't expect it. I always take the mindset of I expect my opponent to stop my attack. I expect my opponent to out-combo, to block, to negate. I expect my opponent to make the decision that best suits them, which is not to take damage, especially if they will lose because of it. So I expect them to try to stop me. That is their job anyway as a player. As my opponent, they're supposed to stop me from winning. They're supposed to stop me from what I want to do. So I want the damage to go through, no doubt. But I don't expect it to go through because my opponent is my opponent, right? So I understand human behavior, right? My opponent doesn't want to lose. Unless my opponent does want to lose and they let me take the W, right? Then that's on them. They chose that, right? But more likely people won't choose to lose if they can choose to win. So they will choose what best suits them. So with that in mind, right, since they will more likely choose to not lose, that's one choice they'll make. Just like they'll choose to win, go for game as they call it, when they have the opportunity to go for game, they'll go all in and try to go for game, right? Those two factors that they will choose to go for game and they will choose to not lose, you can take advantage of that, right? Because you understand that that's more likely what's going to happen. They're going to choose not to lose, therefore they're going to do everything they can not to lose. Therefore, you have to take that to account and make decisions, make plays based off of that. When I combo, when I attack, it's because it's not because I'm trying to make sure they can't out combo and the damage goes through. I hope that that happens, but that's not what I'm expecting. I take the stance of I'm expecting them to out combo, which means they're losing hand advantage. I don't like to combo, at all, offensively or defensively. But if I have to choose between the two, I'd rather combo defensively. It's more logical to combo to defend yourself than to try to deal damage to your opponent, knowing that your opponent can always choose to out combo, right? So it's always better to combo defensively than offensively. That's just my experience. Plus, I just don't like to combo at all because that's just a waste of resources. Which is why I came up with the endless combo concept. Trying to come up with ways where I can boost the attacks of my battle cards, my leader, my units, get their attacks really high. So that way, one, it forces my opponent to combo. I'm not making them strong just, so they look good or just to guarantee the attacks go through. It's really to force my opponent to give up resources and advantage. I attack with strong stuff, so they have to combo. Which is why I play a lot of 20Ks, 30Ks, and stuff like that. Things that can attack more than once. Because if they do choose to out combo my first attack, well, I got a second attack. Try again. Maybe they'll combo the second attack as well. Great. More cards out their hands just because I attacked. So then you can look at attacking and comboing a card as a strategy of hand destruction, in a way where the goal is to get them to combo, get them to give up resources from their hand. More so, you want that more so than you want the damage to go through. Because if the damage goes through, if it's not crit, it's going to their hand. So you're giving them advantage if the attack goes through. So I prefer, or at least I play with the idea that my opponent will out combo my attacks. They will give up cards and advantage just not to take a hit, right? Until they get to the point where they can't, right? Remember, they're choosing to out combo my attacks, but I want them to get to the point where they can't choose, where it gets to the point where they have to take all my attacks. I would like to be in a situation where they have like 2 or 3 cards in their hands. I got like 5 or 6 attackers. I'm just attacking. Shit, even if I have 3 attackers, those 3 cards in their hands might not be enough to stop all my attacks. Right? Then you have to take into account extra cards exist, unisons exist, and people do play extra cards and unisons. So there's a high probability that their hand's not going to be full of a whole bunch of 5Ks and 10Ks, right? Or super counts. So that's other factors you have to take into account. I remember one time when I started, putting out content for Dragon Ball Super. There was some people that pointed out the idea that when I talk about the game and stuff like that, and strategies and concepts and game theory, that it sounds like I don't take what my opponent does to account. Like I don't take to account that they can out combo. I don't take to account that they could block or negate. They say I assume my opponent's not going to do anything. It's like, no, I don't assume my opponent's not going to do anything. I know that if they're tapped out, they're not going to play a negate. And this was and you gotta understand, this was at the time I was saying this stuff, and people assuming that I didn't take what my opponent could do to account. There was no spark and negates, right? There's no a power burst like how you see in this video. There was no dimension magic. The best they had was weak cohesion, which ironically is in this person's hand. He has the alternate art of it. But the point is like there was no free negates, as it were, right? So they had to pay energy. You had to pay energy for weak cohesion, right? At the time I was putting out this information. So it's like I always wait until my opponent tapped out and then go in with with attacking with my leader and Champa so I could get that double strike, because I made sure I waited until they were tapped out to go for the double strike damage, right? And I could turn anything, my leader or a battle card, into a double striker or a finisher, right? So I wait until they're tapped out and then go for the kill, when they have 2 life. So I wasn't assuming anything. I already took to account that if they're tapped out, they won't be able to negate, use a counterattack. So they would, and I make sure they don't have a blocker on the field when I attack. So those are 2 things that I made sure they didn't have or couldn't do. So then they had to outcombo if they didn't want to take the double strike damage. So then I will make my plays. I will make my decision based off of that, based off of the fact that however many cards are in their hands, they either can outcombo and they choose to, or they can't outcombo. But it was never like I'm like, oh yeah, he has 8 cards in his hand, he can't stop me, and I go in for the double strike and think that the attack was going to go through. No, I always went with the idea that, yep, he got like 4 cards in his hand, he should be able to outcombo this attack, But I go in and with the double strike, even though it might sound like I'm wasting the double strike, the fact that I play a lot of, Champas and East Green Kai, not really much of a waste, but let's go with the idea that I'm wasting it, right? It seems like I'm wasting it, but I'm really not wasting it. I'm really forcing them, right? Because I'm planning for the worst, right? Which is they outcombo, but hoping for the best. So if they don't outcombo, the double strike goes through. But if they do outcombo, well, they lost cards from their hands. They gave up hand advantage, right? They're more likely setting themselves back at least a turn. I'll take into account that maybe outcomboing my attack or attacks will set them back 1 turn. It'll take them 1 turn more before they can actually make a good play, which is good enough for me. I'll take advantage of that, because that means I get an extra turn in that scenario. So even though the double strike don't go through and deal damage, what I do get out of it, which is not the damage obviously, is that I get the possibility of an extra turn. So then I plan for that extra turn. So I plan for worst case scenario is they outcombo, but because they outcombo, that more likely gave me an extra turn, and that extra turn I could try to take advantage of, exploit, and make a plan based off of that. So on my next turn, I could be like, all right, my next turn, I'm going to play this specific card that I'm going to use to go for game, because my opponent already tried to stop me, or not tried to, they actually did stop me last turn from going for game, but now they're in a position where they have less chance of stopping me from going for game. So now I'm going to really go for game, right? So last time you could say it was a bluff. Last time I made it look like I was going for game, but I wasn't. But now I'm going for game. And then I can attack, dump my whole hand into the attack, and there's a higher mathematical probability of the attack going through, especially if I count the number of cards in my opponent's hand and take into account the possibility of super combos and, obviously 5k combo power. And I always assume that my opponent has all the cards in the hands they can combo. I always assume that. That's the worst case scenario, right? That every card in the hand they can combo if they need to, right? The best case scenario, right, is that they have some extra cards, some unisons, and that makes it where they can't out combo, right? So worst case scenario, they can out combo. Best case scenario is they can't. So hopefully that helps, people understand, why I do things certain ways. Maybe even notice that when I, in my gameplays that a lot of times, I do a lot of attacks and I don't combo. Like I'll attack, no combo. I attack, no combo. I'm so used to, you see right there, no response in that video. I do that a lot. I'll attack, my opponent says no response. I respond with no response either because I'm not combo. I attack, I don't combo. I attack, I don't combo. I attack, I don't combo. I've been doing that for years now. Like I attack, I don't combo. I'll combo once in a while, either A, to throw my opponent off, or B, like I said, to get them to lose hand advantage. If you look at this battle right now, you see the player at the bottom, their hand is getting nice and thick, and they're comboing, while their opponent only has 3 cards. So right now, their opponent is currently at 6 life. Granted, this is a mill Nimbus, right? So technically, the win con should be milling their opponent out, but for some reason, this player is trying to go in for some damage. If I'm right, that's crit damage, so they're trying to hit the life points, but not give their opponent any advantage. So they're going in with crit damage, which is good, right? Don't want to give them no hand advantage. Don't want to add nothing to their hand. And then he gets the effect to make them mill, so it was a combination of trying to get them to mill and stuff like that. They're trying to reduce any possibility. What's logical in this scenario of why you're doing crit damage, if the goal is to deck your opponent out, why are you doing crit damage, is because, if you think about it this way, it's a really smart tactic, is they're trying to avoid the possibility of them having card effects that says, take a card from your life, add it to your hand. So he's actually trying to reduce the possibility of his opponent having card effects that can give him card advantage from their life. That's why it's a good idea to add crit effects to like a mill deck, for example, because you're actually going to use it to weaken your opponent's ability to add card advantage from their life to their hand. Because if you're milling them and doing some manipulation to their deck, right, through some effects, like Guwasu, manipulating the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck with Guwasu, manipulate supremacy or something, superior, whatever. Anyway, and you're manipulating, you're making it hard for them to get any good cards to fight you back with, right? So then they'll want to try to get good cards from their life. But if you're hitting their life with crit, then none of those good cards are going to their hands. They're just going to the drop. So you're reducing, right? You're narrowing down their choices, right? You're preventing them from getting to the stuff they want. So I always plan for the worst, right? Just like my goal is always to try to get to a certain turn. Like if my kill turn's turn 4 or turn 5, I'm always trying to get there. So I'm always thinking of defending as much as I can to get there. Sometimes the best I could do is stop 5 attacks, but then my opponent comes out with 1 more attack, and that's the attack that matters the most, right? That's the finishing attack. It's like, you got me. I did everything I could. I stopped some attacks. I took some attacks. I was doing everything I could to survive this turn, but you came out with that one last attack, that one more attack that was hard for me to, to take to account, right? I was unable to predict it per se, or it's like, because maybe it was just random. Even you didn't know you were going to get it because maybe something happened, some effect happened. Maybe you played super combo and drew that overwhelm card, and now that changes the situation. Like I counted your hand, I looked at the board, I took to account the possibility of how many attacks you could have thrown at me, but because of that one super combo, drawing you a card, or anything that drew you a card, maybe even the leader swing drew you that overall, that was the deciding factor. That one extra card you got change the outcome of the situation, and you were able to get the extra attack that I wasn't able to account for. Because you got to think about this. The most common thing that's going to happen is, right, the most basic, the smallest number of attacks, especially nowadays. Back in the day, it used to just be leader and at least one battle card. Now it's leader unison, because we have that now, and one battle card. So it used to be you had to worry about a minimum of 2 attacks, right? A minimum. That's if your opponent didn't even have a battle card yet, and then they play one. A minimum of one leader swing, right? Just their leader if they don't play a battle card, right? So just 1 attack. The second is if they do play a battle card, then it's leader and battle card, right? That'd be the minimum. They could always play more, of course, right? But that would be the minimum. But now it's the minimum is it's still just a leader, but then secondary is leader in unison. Then after that is leader, unison, and battle card, right? So now you have to be able to stop up to 3, and that's minimum. So minimum up to 3 attacks, you're gonna have to be able to try to stop, or stop 2 and take 1, that kind of stuff. So you'll take the leader swing, but stop the unison and battle card swing because maybe they have double strike, so you stop them, but you take the leader swing because it's 1 damage. So you take 1 damage and then you stop the other 2 potential 4 damage. Right, with some negates and blockers or out combo, whatever you do to survive, right? So those types of factors, is the kind of stuff that I think about and take to account. Any more rainbow super duels up in here? Thinking, well, I just replay. So I think I'm done. So what other stuff can so planning. So when it comes to comboing, you don't want to combo when you attack, but you do want to combo when you defend if you have to. So your opponent, okay, yeah, I always expect my opponent to out combo attacks. Because I always put them in a position where that's all they could do is out combo my attacks. It's more often than not. Counterplays, there you go. Take into account counterplays, right? The fact that your opponent could counterplay. It could stop you from making a play in the first place, right? Stopping you from attacking, that's normal. That's been happening since set 1. Once they started introducing counterplays into the game, then it's like, okay, now you got to worry about them stopping you from even playing something. Obviously, since the beginning, like since set 1 and stuff like that, there was cold bloodlust, so that was like one thing you had to worry about. You had to worry about play something your opponent like cold bloodlust, like, oh, you got me, negated my effect, and I needed my effect. My effect was going to win me the game, but you stopped me. So that's like one old school counterplay you had to worry about, right? So cold bloodlust is all you had to worry about. You could say Crusher Ball, but that's a little irrelevant. That slows you down, but that doesn't like really impact you. Because if you can still get your effect off, and your effect was the most important effect, let's say it was an effect that lets you KO a battle card, then the Crusher, didn't matter, right? So cold bloodlust mattered. Negating your effect mattered. But then over time we start getting more counterplays, so now you got to worry about other things. So there was a time where you had to worry about your opponent having Flying Nimbus. So Cold Bloodlust, Flying Nimbus, 2 very powerful cards that you had to worry about the most, because good cards there. They definitely gave whoever had those cards the advantage. Cold Bloodlust, shutting down your effect, or win con. Shutting you down is very powerful, right? It's a counter. Then Flying Nimbus, a blanket, a 1 card, extra turn. Basically, you guaranteed an extra turn playing Flying Nimbus. That was powerful. So these types of cards, being able to counter, negate an effect and essentially guarantee an extra turn, um, were powerful, game changing, right? You know, based off of how basic the game was at first. But now we got more stuff like that. We got Violent Rays and Adorning Potential and Topo and so forth. We have more and more cards that have similar effects to Flying Nimbus and Cold Bloodless. And that's the whole point. Cold Bloodless and Flying Nimbus were the OG, the precursor, right? The predecessor, I think it's the predecessor, right? The predecessors to all these other things. You know, without these cards, you know, these were present. These let you know that the future is going to have to be more of these in order for everybody to have, you know, a fighting chance, as it were. Because if only people who play Frieza, right, or a Frieza clan leader, right? No, Frieza's army leader, or Yellow, were the only ones who are going to have that advantage. It's going to have that floodgate negate, you know, and Cold Bloodless, so that, you know, powerful counter for one energy. It was only going to be them, whoever played that strategy. Everybody else will have to suffer, knowing that they're at a disadvantage against whoever played Yellow. But now every color pretty much has their own Flying Nimbus or their own, at least a counter that makes a difference. Like Gassian Trunks for blue makes a difference, right? That's a counter play you can play that drastically gives blue an advantage. Charismatic Frieza, and you get the idea. Things similar to that. They give certain decks the Cold Bloodless like advantage or the Flying Nimbus type of advantage. So with the fact that that's the kind of stuff we got to take into account. Worst case scenario is if one had Cold Bloodless, you better have been prepared for it. Try to outplay it. Try to come up with a way to avoid it. Or play something different than what you really wanted to play to try to bait it out. So you'll play something else, hope it gets Cold Bloodless, so that way your real card, the card you really want, doesn't get Cold Bloodless. So you had to play a certain way to deal with these things because you know they existed. You know, so that's the whole planning for the worst, hoping for the best. You know, sometimes the planning for the worst, hoping for the best, you get into this idea of like, damn, I really, really need to make this play. And if I don't make it now, well, if I can't make it, well, the thing is, if I can't make it now, then I lost anyway. It doesn't matter anyway, because either it gets countered now or doesn't get, or it gets countered later. Either way, it's going to be a problem. So I'd rather get countered now and then hopefully get lucky, maybe make it to later and try it again later and not get countered, right? Than to wait until later, try to do it later, and then get countered. I'd rather get countered now than later, right? Just like I'd rather somebody, for example, like I'd rather somebody Gassian Trunks me early game, like turn 1, like turn 2, turn 3, instead of doing it turn 4 or turn 5, you know, when those are usually my kill turns. Those are the turns I expect to end the game. I don't want them to God seal me then. I'd rather them do it early. Just like I'd rather them use their negates early, you know, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, right? I don't want them to save until turn 4, turn 5, where I'm trying to go for game and they stop, they counter me, right? So that's the kind of stuff, that's how I think. I'm always trying to push my opponents to do everything early, sooner than later. Just like I want my opponent to awaken early, right? Turn 2, turn 3 type of stuff. And then I wait until turn 4 and turn 5 to awaken. So I awaken second instead of awakening first, and so forth and so forth. And these are the reasons why I play the way I play. The reason why you'll notice that I don't awaken until after my opponent. It's rare for me to awaken first. Like there has to be a combo or a strategic reason why I awaken first. It's more likely because I'm comboing my leader's awaken ability with something else. But on average, I always save my awaken. I always force my opponent to awaken first, and then I awaken after. Because I look at awakening as like a trump card. It's a comeback card. It's like, you're almost beating me, but I still have the ability to awaken, and have these cards in my hands. Let me combine my awakening with these cards and do something, you know, to turn the game around. So that's what I do. I treat my awakening as a comeback. I treat it as a as a combo piece, piece to a strategy. Like if I'm trying to do a turn 4 a lightning fast hit play, where I use the space-time transcending hit, I'll tap 3 energy to play him, use my leader's ability to untap 2 energy and awaken, right? Untap the 2 energy, and I already have 1 energy untapped, so now I have 3 energy. I use those 3 energy to activate the active main of space-time transcendent hit, and then grab evolve from my drop or warp a lightning fast hit, and then because I evolved them, I get to deal my opponent 2 damage, and he's a 25k double strike. So if I didn't win by burning my opponent from the evolve effect, I still have the double strike, 25k double strike. I could try to go in for game, attack and dump my hand into attack, and hopefully it goes through. And hopefully at that time my opponent's tapped out, right? They're tapped out, they don't have blockers, so that means they have to try to out combo, and hopefully they can't. Hopefully, right? But then but now, I have to take into account that there's free negates, right? There's opinion, testing the opposition. There's the test the opposition card, right? So it can negate an attack, make a token that's a blocker, right? And we have stuff like Violent Raise, Dormant Potential, Topo, Gohan Minion, right? Gohan's baby's minion. So we have these types of cards that makes it hard, Baby Hachiak, and the list goes on, right? Of things that makes it harder to go for game, makes it easier to defend, harder to attack. And that's something I always noticed in the game since the beginning of the game, is that it's easier to defend than it is to attack. There's the game, the way it's designed, there's more advantage to the defending player than there is to the attacking player. They always make it easy to defend against an attack than it is to attack, right? Think about the fact that you can out combo, right, an attack. That's defense, right? You're comboing defensively, and you can do it for free if you use super combos and 5Ks. In fact, you can do that for free, right? So it makes it easier to defend. When you have to attack, right? When you attack, you pay to play a battle card, right? You pay for a unison. The only thing you don't pay for to attack with is your leader. Your leader is the only true free attacker you have. It's the only attack you're guaranteed every turn for free is your leader attack. And it's not even the best attacker most of the time, but it is a free attacker. But your battle cards, your unisons, right? These cards you have to pay typically, unless you got some free plays, right? But typically you got to pay for those cards to attack, and for free or for cheap. That's the other point. For less or free, your opponent can stop you. 1 energy for negate, right? 2 energy for a flood negate. Think about that, like a Topo or something for a floodgate negate. Like, it's cheaper to defend than it is to attack. It costs more to attack than it does to defend, to block. Like right now, you're seeing MISCS Cohesion just putting in work, and Power Burst just putting in work. That's a black and blue deck right there, and taking full advantage of the fact that it has black and blue energy, and it's has a black and blue strategy, which I like. Impressed by that strategy. Meta Fu, he understands the Kung Fu way. So yeah, he has multicolor. He has blue, yellow, and black. Okay, so it's a blue-yellow deck. It's the basic black stuff. It's cool. I like creativity. I am impressed by this skill strategy this person is playing, and the fact that he still has 6 life. But of course, it's a Janemba deck. They ain't trying to hurt your life points. They're just trying to mill you out. And right now, the Meta Fu is at 13 cards. His opponent is at 26, so he has double the amount of cards his opponent has. So just got to, you see, it will take, well, now he's at 12 cards. So 3 times 4. So if he can mill him 3 times, mill him 3 cards 4 times, 3 times 4, be 12. So if he can, so the leader mills him 2, so 2 times 10, right? 2 times 10 is 12. No, 2 times 6 is 12. I did it wrong. 2 times 6. So he has to swing with the leader 6 more times in order to mill his opponent out. 6 times 2 is 12. And you have to take the fact that within those turns, your opponent's going to draw. So yeah, it is 3 times. Yeah, that's why I said 3 times 4. It's going to take 4 turns for him to mill him out, because he's going to draw for his turn, so that's 1 card. You swing with the leader, mill him 2, so that's 3 cards. 1 and 2 is 3. So in 4 turns, he can deck him out. Unless he can mill him more on his turn, he can shrink it down. The point is, just with the leader swing and their opponent drawing a card, that's the most basic thing you know for a fact can happen, is you attacking, milling your opponent for 2, and they drawing for the draw phase. You can guarantee 3 cards a turn. But if you have effects that can mill even more, then mill more, obviously, and that shortens down how many times. Right now I'm just counting leader swing and draw phase towards the how many turns left until the Janemba player wins from milling their opponent out. So the Janemba player, even without extra mills, without extra mill effects, he just needs to survive 4 more turns. He just needs 4 more turns of attacking, his opponent drawing, attacking, opponent drawing, for him to mill his opponent out. So, and those are super combos. If his opponent draws for each and every one of those, if I think those are the sparking ones. I think drawing. I don't know. Is drawing an option for those? Because he should have been drawing. Well, he just drew a card, so there's that. So now he's at 9. So technically 3 turns. So it'll take 3 turns if he doesn't lose. He has 3 life, so he could lose. I wasn't paying attention to the duel earlier, so I don't know who won. Ironically, I'm rooting for the Janemba player. I am a bit of a fan of mill strategies, just because it's an alternate way of winning. Like I said, because it's so easy to defend when it comes to attacking, it's hard to deal damage through attacks. So burn and mill are the best course of actions if to win, right? They're the best things to get into if you want to win a lot, because those avenues are not as it's hard for your opponent to defend against mill, right, and against burn. Eventually, someday they'll make it, where it's not that hard to lose to mill, not that hard to lose to burn. But right now, burn and mill are the more reliable way of winning matches. So like I said, it's very easy to defend, to block. I've said it many times before. The first 4 damage is the easiest. Your opponent normally lets you deal them 4 damage. The next 2 requires a little bit of effort, because they're not. Once they hit 4 life, they don't want you to deal them damage. But you can sneak in some 2 damage real quick. But the last 2 is usually the hardest. They do everything they can to stop the last 2. And like I said, because they make the choice to stop you from dealing the last 2 damage, right? You always expect them to stop you. So I don't think my opponent's going to let me deal them the last 2 damage. That's why I say the last 2 is the hardest. The first 4, yes, of course, they always let you deal it. I've proven it many times with gameplay, how easy it is for me to deal my opponent 4 damage, because they let me. Literally, because they let me. Even while I'm attacking, I'm like, they're not going to block this double strike. It's only 10k double strike, but they're not going to block it. They could use 5k to stop it, but they're not. They're going to take it. And then they do, which is proof that, yes, dealing the first 4 damage ain't the hardest, because usually your opponent is going to let you do it. The next 2 requires a little bit of effort. They're going to try to out-combo that. But the last 2 is the one they always will block, negate, and out-combo. And they always save their super combos for when they have 2 life. That's another factor you have to take into account, that I already take into account, is that I noticed that most people, they might have super combos at the beginning of the game, but they won't use it in the beginning. They'll save it for late game. They'll use it to defend themselves, so they don't lose late game. So they can out combo a final attack, or they use a super combo for them to try to do a final attack. So they always save super combos for late game. And this is something I've heard a lot of times, that since set 1 back in the day, people used to talk about that they always save their super combos. They never charge them. They never use them early. They always save them for like turn 4, kill turns. They always save it for the end of the game. It's like, it's understandable. I'm not against the strategy and the idea. It's just the fact that I know that that's the normal thought. The normal thought is save it for when you try to go for game, because you're going to need as much combo power as possible. You want to get to the point where your opponent is down to 2 life. You have a double striker. They have less cards in their hands than you. You have a whole bunch of super combos, and go dump your whole hand into the attack. Super combos and all, and hopefully you win. But then the funny thing is, your opponent has super combos. They combo, they draw, they combo, and then they manage to out combo you. And how I always really hate seeing that. Like, damn, he beat you. He beat you by 5K. 5K is how he beat you. I remember one time I swung like 65K, or no, it was like 70K to my friend, and and I just did it just to be funny, just like, yo, this is the first time I'm actually gonna dump my whole hand into attack. Because normally I don't do that, because the stupidity of what if they out combo, right? But this time I was just joking around. I was like, no way my friend can out combo. So I was like, just for the lows, I dumped my whole hand into the attack, got my attack up to 70K, just to flex, right? Just to be like, yeah, I did it. I got to 70K, and he got to 75K. I'm like, oh my god. And remember, I don't play super combos at that time, or I wasn't playing super combos at that time. So I got my attack really high, with a whole bunch of 5Ks, and a couple of 10Ks that required energy. But that's besides the point. The point is that I got to 70K without super combos, but he did have super combos, and he was able to get 75K. It's like, that's so hilarious. I just dumped my whole hand just for the lows, and then ended up epically failing. So that's a thing. So that was funny, because it should have been game, but it wasn't. It was like, wow. And you gotta understand, he used his whole hand for it, so he wasted his whole hand to stop that attack, and it wasn't that deep, right? I didn't have to dump my whole hand into attack. I just did it, for the lows, right? I was just trolling, as it were, just doing it for fun, and I was expecting to win, because it's like, normally that's what happens. but it was so funny that he out combo. Was like, yo, you actually managed to out combo. Oh, that's why I will always plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? I would never make that mistake again. So lesson learned, right? And that's why I make these master classes, to share my knowledge, experience. Most of my knowledge and experience comes from other card games that I played, that I transfer over the experience and the knowledge and all the stuff that I figured out from playing the other games, bring them over here and then apply it to this game, because this game is a lot like Magic, Duel Masters, and a lot of other card games. They're similar. So this game obviously was inspired by a lot of other card games. So there's a lot of similar strategies, game mechanics, game theories that I apply to this game, and get some really good results. And I'm sharing that results of training, as it were, right? The results of my experience and knowledge, so that way you can get better. Or if in the future, for some reason, I forget how to play this game, I can watch these videos and gain all this knowledge back, right? All this experience. That's the end of the video.